Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. My very uh, good students, friends, mentors, learners, peers. Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. First of all, I would like to convey my heartiest Eid greetings to you and your families. And I believe that within this Eid holidays, you and your family have been safe and healthy. Indeed, it's a challenging time for all of us, particularly in the wake of this lockdown, where the physical movement has been restricted to greater extent. Certainly, the Eid and the happiness and joys of Eid cannot be enjoyed the way we liked and the way we had in the past. But certainly, I believe that this is a temporary phase, and soon this test and this testimony and this exam will be over by the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the life would come to normal once again. And certainly, I believe that within this lockdown period, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gifted with us with enough time, ample time to offer our supplication or ibadah, qiyam, sujood before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and indeed to solicit His will. So in the positive context, certainly it was a great time we spent in the Ramadan, and certainly we offered some quality time and quality ibadah and riyaza before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I believe that and pray that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all and forgive us, accept our supplications. At the same time, just 2 days before the Eid holidays, we had a very unfortunate incident in when the PIA plane was crashed at the Karachi airport, just next to the airport, and about 100 people died in this unfortunate incident. At the same time, a number of people in the meanwhile have also died of the coronavirus, and a big number are still in the hospitals, and some of them are definitely in the critical conditions. The corona infected people at the moment have already crossed 60,000, which is an alarming figure. And certainly the lockdown, which has been eased by the government, is creating a lot of troubles also. So this is again a word of caution from the government that we should be taking care of all the SOPs to make sure that we are safe and sound and healthy and protected. Certainly for the government, it is a very uphill challenge to deal with this health emergency and crisis, because at one hand, the people are becoming infected in large number, and at the second hand, we see that at the other hand, a big number of people who are poor class, middle class, even the shopkeepers, the small and medium enterprises are becoming really stuck up with the businesses because the business activities have been stalled for the last 2.5 months. So this all together has brought a lot of economic miseries for the people and a big challenge for the government as well. So we hope that in the times to come, the government would relax this lockdown situation. Let me pray for the departed soul. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. قل الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. اللهم ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. والله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. والله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. والله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد. اللهم اغفر لحينا وميتنا وشاهدنا وغائبنا وصغيرنا وكبيرنا وذكرنا وانسانا لمن احييته منا فاحيي الاسلام وتوفيق منا وتوفيق الايمان. اللهم اني اعوذ بك من الطعن والتعون وعظيم البلاء بالنفس والاهل والولد وكل العالم المسلم. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الابرار يا عزيز يا غفار. Today, briefly, we will discuss the fifth lecture of the environmental impact assessment, and that's about the public involvement in the EIA process. And if we go to the first lecture, we remember that once the EIA report is completed, in the development of the EIA report, it is more advisable that we include the public, which is the custodian of the environment, certainly on board, and we take them into account so that if there is any observations and any reservations, they may take up the case in time and there is no further delay. So we have to identify that who are the public, what is the participation, and what is the environmental decision-making process, and what are the tools we can use. So these are the four questions we would like to answer in this presentation. Now, the public means one or more natural legal persons, a collection of numerous continually shifting interests and alliances which may be in conflict with each other, a cage all to describe those with an interest in the decision other than a proponent, operator, or responsible authority. So the people who are other than the proponent of the projects, operator, and responsible authority for execution, they can be the public. The individual making up a public may be involved as individual or as a members of organizations. They may become involved due to their proximity, economic, social, or environmental issues, values, and etc. So there can be many reasons for their involvement in this process. A person does not have to be a citizen or to be a member of the public. So it's not necessary that if someone is based in Islamabad, he cannot object in a project environmental assessment in Karachi. So it's not even the public being the global citizen can object some project even in the international level. In practice, there are many public as there are different people who care positively or negatively about a project. Who they are may depend on their ethical, moral, interest, welfare, and other viewpoints. Other reasons the public may be affected include the proximity. For example, the source of pollution may be located very close to a particular community, so the pollution, property values, and employment may be affected. The economic impact may be, for example, the land owners, the house owners, the use, for example, the amenity value, right of way, vista. The social and environmental issues can create the public involvement like justice and risk, values like animal rights, ecology, and religion. So all these together can attract the interest of the public in the projects. Now, the stakeholders of the public is one are literally those with a stake in issue may include non-governmental organization, government or its agents, industry, individual, community. So there may be bigger stakeholders. Stakeholders do not always want to be involved in any environmental decision-making process, but they have the right to know if their interests are affected. They may also want to become involved at the different stages of the processes. So the stakeholders may be a bigger entity, and they may not normally involve, but they may involve in the later stage of the project. Now, the public participation or public involvement means different things to different people. The level at which the public is involved varies with the relevant legislation and the attitude of the other stakeholders. Simply stated, the participation is to take part, to share and act together. Participation is an essential part of developing a sustainable future. And you see that one of the sustainable development goal is partnership and participation and involvement, which is, I think, the last 17 goal of the 17 SDGs. What is environmental decision making? Is any process of decision making where consequent significant environmental impacts are a possibility. Includes lawmaking, policy making, spatial planning, strategic planning, resource management planning, licensing of industry like IPC, IPPC, environmental assessment, budgetary decisions. So all these are basically the environmental decision making, which have impact on various environmental parameters. Studies indicate that a serious gap in understanding or trust between the stakeholders. Existing decision-making structure are often based on DAD, that is decide, announce, and defend. And other option is that decide, educate the people about the decision, announce, and defend. So there are two methods, and this can be seen as one source of this gap is trust. So if you really want to create the trust, you would prefer to be a dead kind of policy making rather than dead, in which you don't educate the people about the decisions. Now, the unilateral decision you see is straight, and you just start the project and you implement without consulting and you see when you approve the project, you don't see any problem here. But when we go to the implementation stage, we have a lot of zigzags and we have a lot of divergence. But in the public participation or participatory decision making, we may have some problem in the identification and planning stage. But once the project is started, we don't have too many obstructions and we are moving straight forward in the project. Now, the guiding principles for the participation is the plan early for public participation. Now, this is very unfortunate that generally in Pakistan and other developing countries, we see that the public is involved at the later stage. And once the environmental document or statement is ready, then we involve the public, which I think is not appropriate, because many things which have not been designed and planned in consultation with the public are then objected by the community. So the stakeholder must be identified and legitimately make it clear to the outset just how much influence the public can have. So different segments of public have different influence on the projects. So identify the appropriate techniques to be used for each stage of the process, provide information in the form that the recipients can understand, hold events at a time in venue to suit all participants, allow sufficient time for assimilation and respond to information, ensure inputs of stakeholders. These are some of the principles to ensure the public participation. In this figure, you see that on the left side, we see the public involvement stages, and on the right, we see the environmental assessment. For example, during the identification stage of the project, we normally have the environmental screening. And at this stage, we need to identify the stakeholder and the public who can influence the project. Once we go to the formulation or appraisal of the project, which is the determining the TOR and scheduling of the environmental assessment and the scoping, we need to develop the public involvement, the consultation as appropriate participation, release preliminary information on proposal so that the public concern can be studied. Once the environmental draft is submitted, statement is submitted, the draft report is shared with the public and the NGOs and the INGOs, and the consultation is started about the EA. And the outcome from the consultation is recorded in final EA report is then revised based on these, while incorporating most of these concerns. And once the EA is resubmitted after incorporating the results, then the EA team ensures that concerns are individual, and then finally we go to the approval of the project and financing. In the financing stage, even in the financing and implementation, we would need to have the participation of the public. For example, in the financing, we can have the funding, finding from consultation and participation reflected as appropriate in financing agreement. We can also have the implementation, the suitable short-term and long-term monitoring indicators with the support of the public and so on. Now, it's very important to have a very well-thought planning process for the participation. For example, we can set the objectives by discussion with the stakeholders, clear understanding of the limitations objective change during the stage of the process, select technique for each stage to achieve the objectives. Now, so once we are trying to set the objective of the public participation, we need to take care of the environmental protection as a top agenda, the legal requirements and the legislation which is there, proponent objective versus public objectives, that what is the proponent objective. Two-way communication is really very important. We should not only have the top-down communication, rather bottom-up communication is also important. And then how the experts and public are looking at the project, and then finally the level of participation is also very important, to which level the participation can be encouraged. So the dialogue process, which is the bridge between the two, once we enter, then there are questions like who is involved, what is the situation, what don't we know, where are the splits, and so on. And then we have the answers to such kind of questions, and the process is helping as a bridge, and then by the end of the day we have the results. So this is very important that we have dialogue process. We can use different methods for the involvement of the public in the environmental assessment studies. It would depend on the complexity of the issue, processes which are already in place, what processes have been tried previously, and what are the results, what is the geographical scale of the issue. Definitely, if the geographical scale of the issue is very large, then we may use different tools and a combination of different tools to achieve the public participation. At what level of the societal structure is the process to operate? What resources are available in time, money, and in-house skills? And will external professional facilitators or consultant need to be employed? What is the time scale? So these are the questions which we keep in mind when we are addressing the public participation. There are different approaches like advertisement, the printed press releases, newspapers, newsletters, bell stuffers, the public displays. We can have the website information repositories, site visits, videos, independent technical documents, and expertise, and so on. So we can use any or one of these or combination of these options, and normally this is level 1 participation. In level 2, which we further want to intensify the participation through public meetings, public hearings, the internet, free phone telephone lines or call center, interviews, surveys, response sheets, random postal, telephone, and web surveys. The level 2 information feedback, which we can expect is deliberative polling, teleconferencing, presentation to community groups, expert panel, field offices, informal small group meetings, and so on. So we can ensure the in level 3 consultation, we want to deeply educate the people through workshop, through focus group, open house, and the Delphi method. Now, it's very unfortunate in Pakistan and in developing countries that the public consultation is barely a formality, and this is done for 1 or a half a day, and there is no rigorous workshop and focus group discussion on the various aspects, environmental aspects of the project. So I think the bottom line is that in the countries like Pakistan, we would like to strengthen the public hearing and participation process in the environmental assessment. In the extended environment, we have the citizen juries, we have the advisory groups, the environmental groups, the task forces, the real community visioning, and the think tanks from the community who can also be helping. Now, the participatory events, which we can have a number of tools. For example, the key stakeholders in this public involvement can be people can be affected by the proposal, the proponents, the government agencies, the NGOs, the donors, the sector, academics, and all. The process should be inclusive, that all the people who can be affected directly or indirectly must be covered in the process. It should be open and transparent. Everything on ground should be placed before the stakeholders. Relevant, focus on the issue that matter. It should not be just a formality in which we just discuss few issues. Fair, it should be impartially conducted, and equity and fairness must be ensured so that people can have a better understanding of the problem and they can give you appropriate results. It should be responsive to the requirements of the stakeholders. Yes, the stakeholder requirement must be addressed, and it should be credible so that the people have the confidence and trust in it. And for the credibility, certainly the communication with the people is very important. The availability of relevant information to them is really very important in timely manner. Now, the public involvement process we discussed in last few, that when we are screening, we need for EIA, we may need the involvement of public. When we are scoping, for example, the key issue is an alternative, again, we may need the involvement of public. And when we are going for impact analysis, this again may involve the public in mitigation, which we are proposing. Similarly, the reviews which have the commenting and responding to the EIA reports, and finally implementation and monitoring. So in all these phases, we normally need to involve the public and the stakeholders. Now, the public involvement program, we need to identify the scope, the interested and affected people, appropriate techniques, relationship to decision making, feedback, understand the analysis of stakeholders, keeping the budget and timelines in mind, and confidentiality of the people information. So the right information must be provided, sufficient time should be given to the people, appropriate opportunities, respond issues and concern, feedback, and choose the venues and time. Level of public involvement can be just an information level. It can be in two-way communication in which the question and answer and the concern. There might be some consultation between the public and in the proponent. The two-way exchange of information, the participation, the interaction with the public, negotiation, and face-to-face discussion. So these are various levels of the public involvement. Now, we have a lot of conflicts when we are dealing with the public. Certainly, the public have a lot of concern with the new projects. So the most important thing is to involve the stakeholder right at the beginning. The communication channel must be really very rigorous. The proposal and its objectives should be very clearly defined. We have to listen to the concern and interest of the affected people. We have to treat the people fairly and impartially. Must be empathetic and flexible, and we must mitigate impacts and compensate for loss and damage, and acknowledge the concern and provide feedback. People normally are not very confident about the public involvement, and the authorities many times would like to, one way or the other, way avoid the public involvement because they may think it's too early. It will take too long time and maybe costing too high. It will stir up opposition right at the beginning. People will only hear from the articulate, will raise expectation, and people would not understand. So these are some of the concerns, but most of these concerns are unfortunately not well-founded and not based on facts. This is one of the notices which was issued by the Punjab, I think, Environmental Protection Agency, Lahore, about the project. And the project was basically the construction of Orient Square multi-story building in the Johar town. And this was an EPA report, EIA report, which was presented, and there was a public hearing for this project. This is another federal government, Pakistan Environmental Protection Agency, and the project is basically the environmental impact assessment report of the development of a signal-free controlled access corridor of Islamabad Highway from 0 point to GT Road, and this has been now constructed, and this is basically the Dr. Shahid is the project director of this project, and the EIA monitoring. And now the involvement of public is generally not very effective in countries like Pakistan. There might be multiple reasons. The biggest reason is poverty, because the real stakeholders of the projects are not in a position to afford and come to the public involvement process. They may be rural and remote area. They may be illiterate in most of the cases. They even don't know the language of the EIA report, and they may even don't know the objective of the project. So the initial phase, even if they are allowed to come, they don't understand the project. There may be some culture and local values which prevent them to involve, particularly females, which are very much restricted to involve into this process. The language may be a barrier. For example, most of the EIA reports are written in English, but the local people may be knowing the local languages, regional languages. This again can be a very big impediment to create involvement of the public. The legal system may override the traditional systems. Dominance of the interest groups, the land mafia, the developers all together may not allow them to take part in this process, and then the confidentiality of the information to greater extent that they are not exposed to the people. So with this, these are some of the references, and certainly the environmental involvement, public involvement is one of the very strong tools to create the public involvement in the beginning, right in the beginning and start of the project, so that there is no much opposition from the people. So thank you very much. I think this was enough for today. A small lecture on the public involvement in the EIA process. And I once again pray for the health and prosperity of all the students and learners. Thank you very much.